want to anticipate a feature of my novel that I have been thinking about for a while, but I haven't actually. I had been thinking about it for a number of years, but I hadn't thought about it directly in relation to the novel because I only conceived the novel back in 2012. So I hadn't had enough time to think about it, but I've been getting a lot of ideas about it lately and about how I might build this feature into it. The idea was again stimulated by my watching of this very interesting series called The Unmasking, and its idea in there about the hex, if you will, on humanity having something to do with the inflicting of pain onto women in childbirth. And then I began developing this idea, which I had been thinking about for a number of years, actually, in relation to Mr. Strauss's philosophy, because I noted how he emphasizes the two creation events in Genesis, how in the one creation it's as if all beings descend uniformly from God, but then he emphasizes that second creation event where the females were created out of the rib and are kind of separate from, if you will. So I'm not attributing to Strauss that he or that anyone associated with this philosophy had actually inflicted that on females. I'm raising the question. See, is there a kind of male domination or dominance or predominance or pre and post dominance in the philosophy that takes the original conception of femininity as being the stronger weaker sex, if you will. But notice that always in the biblical tradition there's some sort of emphasis on females being the weaker sex. But the weaker what used to mean the stronger, in that it used to mean the more gentle parts of our nature, the more embracing, the more loving, the more compassionate. And so I had seen something of at least Strauss posing the mystery of this idea. And it goes back really to my interpretation of Greek philosophy and knowing how terrified Greek males were of females and of the power, like a feminine intuition or feminine religion, in the persecution of the Dionysian cults, which were originally derived from femininity and from uncontrolled religious worship by the feminine, because the Dionysian cults came from Asia Minor. They descended from Asia Minor, and they were like this very powerful force of femininity and feminine religious creation that comes into being in Greece, and can be seen in Euripides' Bacchae, for example. In the Bacchae, you see the mother of Pentheus actually slay Pentheus, her very son, in the center or nucleus or womb of religious Dionysianism, and that's kind of Euripides. So that's Euripides' presentation of the fear that Greek men had of females and of the feminine. And so in the series, The Unmasking, it says there's kind of a hex placed on females. And so I began reading back into the tradition of the biblical tradition and tried to see if there isn't some kind of traumatic, some sort of traumaticness that is inflicted upon females by the very process of birth today, which I had, because in the 70s or 80s I saw a show on how you can create birth in water for females, and how that birth how when the child comes out of the womb, in the air and the harsh air and the harsh environment of the air surrounding the child, the child will cry and be traumatized by that. And it's pretty obvious, if anybody gets in a swimming pool on a nice warm day, and then, it's maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then at 6 o'clock when it gets a little cool outside, if you come out of the pool, you can kind of feel that chill that you feel when you get out of the pool. And that could be creating a kind of trauma which is remembered by a child throughout its life, that it had the trauma of entering the world in that way. And so it's something that every woman today, because they go to hospitals to have their children born. So some women choose to have children at home. I know, for example, in my friend Laurita's, in the past, women would give birth to children at home. They didn't go to the hospital. But that's less traumatic because you have your own, ancestors present, and so it's more of a familial, loving environment, if you will. Just like death in the past in my hometown of Spillville, death was dealt with a little more, the trauma of death. See, you're traumatized when you come into the world through this kind of way, and the child is traumatized by it, and we're traumatized more by death today. I noted it in relation to my friend Laurita and I, how we had his traumatic separation right at the very time we should have been embracing each other, because her father died and my father died at around the same time. And so this kind of trauma, see, is a way, I think, of keeping them from feeling the unity that they might feel if these things didn't exist. And so it was an experimental way of reading Strauss's philosophy and seeing what he had to say there about the relation of the feminine to the masculine, and the relation of bringing up the idea of Eros. Philosophy was a way of posing this question. In my novel, I'm going to actually create this kind of birthing center that the females, Madison and the debutante, actually give rise to this new community of females that give the birthing process a whole new feel, if you will. They make a clinic and they actually artistically design the whole thing, and it's a warm environment, and it's a familial environment, and it's a communitarian environment. And they find, in this experiment that they do with communitarianism, they find that the whole success of the community is better because they start out with the idea that it's a limited community. It's 50 to 100 people. And so everybody knows each other. Everybody is in the womb of the community, if you will. And it prevents, because they figure out, Madison figures out along with the debutante, this is when they come together, and then they act after they come together after the reunion. But as they move towards the reunion, they're both having elements coming into their mind which cause them to realize these things, that these things have been a problem for them in their life, and they're working them out. So it's, I think, an important dimension to the novel, that it has this creation of a womb-like communitarianism that brings back the strands of our past that may have been traumatizing us, and it delivers us back into a kind of community, to recur to Strauss's concept of Bodenständigkeit, rootedness in the soil, that is based on a liberation from this element of separation of the feminine and masculine, the element of this fear of the feminine, this kind of restoration, maybe against Eros philosophy. Possibly, I don't know what Strauss had, what his philosophy was about that, but it comes into play in the novel, and it comes into play in this very artistic reformation or rebirth of man and community through the work of Madison and the debutante, my characters in the novel. But it goes back to conversations I've had over the years with Laurita and ideas that she and I developed together. As I say, the whole novel kind of descends from my experience of these very fine characters in the world, my philosophizing with my friends and thinking with my friends, and I'm trying to tie together all these elements, not just for it's not just a novel that I want to throw out there and have just tossed over its shoulder, but the people in the world who are want to recover a sense of this kind of primitive unity might actually be able to do so. And this is against the idea of a revolutionary. It's the idea is that it can be founded within the modern environment, and it can be founded as a non-revolutionary philosophy. So it's not seeking to take diamond mines back, or not seeking to take the opium fields back, or not seeking to destroy communication or modes of communication or technology. It's perfectly consistent with all those things, but it allows for the more judicious application and experience of such things. And this is the main idea behind this birthing center that is one of the chapters, or about 3 chapters of my novel, where it's created as this kind of womb-like environment where females give birth to children and then feel more. The children themselves, it turns out, end up being less troubled and more unified in the community that is created in those chapters.